player. But that made me think of important dates for you as a fan to always keep in mind when it comes to sample sizes and why sample sizes are important. So here are 3 dates that I think you should lock in on as a fan when it comes to performance, what's going on in the game, and what you should look forward to when we're talking about these sample sizes. Date number 1, Memorial Day. Memorial Day is an important date when it comes to production for me, because at that point, you're talking about 8 weeks, 2 months worth of sample. That's a large enough sample size to say, okay, things are going really well. This guy is putting together a really strong start to his first half. You could start talking about a guy potentially, being on an all-star track. You could talk about, what he looks like in terms of the early MVP or Cy Young races that usually change by the time we get to the end of June. But that's the sample size that I look at, where it's like, okay, let's start following this and a little bit more closely. I think on the other side, that's a large enough sample size to say, okay, this is no longer a trend of bad for this guy. This guy has some serious concerns, where if you look up at the player and they are sub 200, right? The OPS is below 600. You're looking at a tough stretch where you say, okay, does this team potentially need to make a change here, right? For a young player, you talk about, okay, do you send them to AAA? For a veteran player, you start talking about, okay, what can be done, to get this player back on track to like this, or you start saying, is there an injury here that we don't know about? All these different things are a reason that Memorial Day is good when it comes to sample size. I think the other thing that you look at when it comes to Memorial Day, this is where teams really start to look at themselves and say, these are our strengths as a team this year. These are our weaknesses. And you really start to assess, what you are as a 26-man roster. Executives are looking at, okay, this is what we have right now. This is what we're really good at. This is what we potentially might need when you're talking about player acquisition, potential trades a couple months down the line where you're talking about the trade deadline. So that's why I look at Memorial Day as being a really good date when it comes to that aspect of the game. And also, when you're talking about the standings, that's when you really start to look at it and say, okay, teams have evened out here, things have kind of stabilized, and you can really start to look at the teams that are playing good baseball, and then you can also look at the teams that aren't playing good baseball, where it's like, okay, this team could potentially, if they stay playing at this level, could be a team that is a buyer at the trade deadline. And this team is probably a team that's going to be trending towards being a seller at the trade deadline. So Memorial Day is date number 1. The second date for me is July 1st. There's a lot of things going on in Major League Baseball at July 1st. Number 1, we're getting close to the All-Star break. And so you're looking at the complete first half for guys offensively, pitching-wise, and saying, all right, these guys are going to be all-stars. You're looking at a first half and saying, okay, this team is definitely a buyer at the trade deadline. This team is more than likely going to be a seller at the trade deadline. You're also talking about, from a front office perspective, teams are all over the place because, number 1, during the All-Star break, you have the MLB draft. So you have scouting departments. Their amateur scouting departments are really locked in at that time because you're trying to figure out who you're drafting, what bonus pool money that you have, what players you want to target, those type of things. Then you have the pro scouting department that is really starting to lock in on player acquisition. So you have teams out scouting, trying to figure out what players you could potentially acquire at the trade deadline. You have GMs already on the phone with other GMs or AGMs around the league saying, okay, is this guy potentially available? Are you guys selling? That's a big one. Because I think at that time of year, especially when you have a team hovering around 500, I've known executives for long enough that are begging, please, can we go on a run here where we win 7 of 10, we win 10 of 15, and we could put ourselves in the buyer category. Or the other thing, you've been hovering around 500, and it's like, can we decide if we want to be a team that makes it to the postseason or not? Like, at that point, let's not be 500 on deadline day. If we're not going to be one of these good teams, one of these contenders, that 7-game losing streak that comes a couple weeks for the deadline, executives look at that and say, hey, at least we can pick a lane right now. Like, you don't have to hover in that space where you are trying to do both things, where you buy and sell. Like, you hear that, and that's I hate hearing that, because that means that's a team that really didn't make a decision on what they wanted to do oftentimes. I know there are exceptions to the rule, but it's really hard not to pick a lane when it comes to buying or selling. So that's why July 1st for me is another important date to look at, because the trade deadline's coming, the MLB draft is approaching, and the All-Star break. And so you have front offices, whether it's pro scouting in the big league side, and then you have amateur scouting departments that are working on the draft so they can decide who they want their draft picks to be during the All-Star break. And then the third date to consider as a fan, as you're thinking of all these different things, August 3rd. This year, that's the trade deadline. And so, one way or another, your team is either buying or selling. Teams don't always know, right? Like, there are times where you have a team that you think is going to buy and they stand pat. You have teams that you think they're going to sell and they buy, right? Or they stand pat for whatever reason, right? They don't sell off like you think they're going to. Both of those things happen at every trade deadline. Some trade deadlines are more active than others. As we get closer to the trade deadline, we'll have more conversations about things teams are thinking about during that week and the weeks approaching. But those are the 3 dates I would just lock in on as a fan. Memorial Day, July 1st, August 3rd, which is the trade deadline. And so as you're thinking of all these things, and you're thinking of your team having a hot start, or maybe your team being cold, I understand it's not fun when you feel like, hey, these guys aren't playing well. But your team could be on a 4 or 5 game losing streak, and they can go on a 7 to 8 game winning streak. And the sample sizes aren't big enough right now where you're saying, hey, yeah, this is really, really bad. We're going to be garbage. This team's not going to the postseason. Just give it a couple more weeks, and then we can start to have more conversations about your team, about some of these guys that might have numbers up there on the scoreboard that you're like, it's not looking great. Because the honest truth is, players think about that too. They might not think about it as much as you might as a fan, but you get to May and you look up at that board and you see sub 200 guys. Guys have told me, like, yeah, you start to squeeze the bat a little tighter, because you're thinking, man, I know I'm a better player than that number shows. And so you got to start, for them, what they say is, like, you got to put games together, put it bats together, and then, let the chips fall with where they may. But it's still going to the 3rd week of the season. There are 26 weeks in a baseball season. So 3 weeks isn't going to determine if a team makes or misses the postseason. Because right now, while you're listening, or if you're watching on YouTube, you could pause. Look at the MLB standings when you're listening to this podcast. You'll see a lot of teams in Major League Baseball mixed in there that will not look the same when we get 3, 4, 5 weeks down the line. So those are your important dates of the season.